Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Running the Gauntlet. Today we are finishing out the Phase 1 gauntlets in the Rise of the Phoenix DLC expansion, and this is the level 40 Fire and Fury gauntlet run. Now, the thing that you need to be aware of going into this, if you are new to the gauntlet system, is these first 4 gauntlets are how you unlock the DLC characters that are added with the Rise of the Phoenix expansion, and this one in particular is to unlock the final character, which is Phoenix. In contrast to some of the last few that we've seen, this one actually has 4 phases instead of 3, and is my favorite within the original or the Phase 1 gauntlets because it allows you to run through and face off against all of the other characters that you had already unlocked while progressing through this. So the first phase of this is going to involve a couple of small mini-boss type fights against mindless ones of both the elemental kind and the standard grunts. There will also be a few enemies that have the Phoenix Force attribute applied to them, which upon defeating those characters, you can absorb that Phoenix Force energy to any one of your team members. And the drawback to this is you will receive some fire damage as you are imbued with that power, but the benefit is that you will also deal some increased damage as you are doing so. So after this, that past mandatory combat segment, we can progress into the final battle arena, which is going to have us facing off against Iceman. And Iceman also has the Phoenix Force imbuement activated on him, so do keep that in mind. Now, he's otherwise pretty straightforward. There are a couple of other grunts that will spawn in during the course of this fight, namely the ice elemental mindless ones. But there is another thing that spawns in right in the center of the arena, and that is in the form of the Ice Ring Danger Room Hazard. And that's important to remember, as we will come back to that a little bit later. Phase 2 isn't nearly as drawn out. This is a segment where we will need to face off against Gambit, and Gambit also has that Phoenix Force power imbuement. But there are also a couple of the AIM soldiers, and annoyingly, a couple of the snipers that hang out on the rim of this battle arena, and there will be a few more that spawn in as the fight goes on. Now, we really just need to get Gambit down and taken out, but you'll notice as this fight comes to a close, there are a couple of gravity orbs that come across from 2 additional danger room hazards. Keep those ones in mind as well, as we will come back to touch on them a bit later. Phase number 3 of this gauntlet run involves a fight against Cable, and the Cable fight itself is pretty straightforward. We will eventually see Cyclops jumping in as well after you get Cable down to the 40 or 50% health mark. The danger room hazard here is not one that you need to take note of for later use, but just be aware that there is that piston that drops down from the ceiling and causes larger amounts of damage as you continue through, as it can be annoying when you are looking through the fight and attempting to clear out these opponents. Unlike the previous segments, you do need to defeat both Cyclops and Cable rather than just the included DLC character, but that should be pretty straightforward here. We'll just lay a couple of additional attacks into Cyclops here, and that should allow us to move right along through, though it does tend to draw us back a little bit with the piston that keeps plunging down from the ceiling as we seek to finish this out. Cyclops is also one of those annoying characters to have to deal with when you're fighting against him, because a lot of his attacks do go out and bounce around the arena, and he has a lot of ranged capability that he likes to use and abuse. But we now have him put down, and that allows us to open up the 4th and final section of this gauntlet. It's funny because it's prefaced with you needing to defeat Phoenix when she appears, but she's the only enemy that will appear over the course of this fight. She also has the Phoenix Force power imbuement, which is in addition to her standard power set, and will buff up her overall attacks as well. So be aware of that as you go to face off against here. Now, the danger room hazard that we see in here is very different from any of the other ones that we've seen, as it projects a protective barrier around the enemy that you are seeking to take down. And the reason that that is problematic is because you cannot deal a single iota of damage to the boss character you are trying to take down until that shield generator is removed. But that is important to keep in mind because that plays into one of the rewards from the clear conditions of this gauntlet. And with that taken care of, let's now transition over to talk about the 4 main things that you need to be aware about when collecting the rewards. The first one, of course, is clearing the gauntlet once. That will unlock Phoenix as a playable character for your team and for your enjoyment and use. The second clear condition is destroying 5 or more hazard devices. And that's where I was pointing out that we need to keep in mind what we're looking at. Now, in one single run of the gauntlet, you are not going to be able to get those 5 hazards, as there are 5 different hazards that show up, but the piston that drops down in the fight against Cable and Cyclops is not a hazard that can be destroyed. It rather just comes in and out at its own leisure, and you can't do anything to get rid of it. You just need to work with it and dance around it. So in this first section with Iceman, there is the ice hazard that spawns in right in the very center. In the Gambit fight, there are 2 gravity hazards that pop in, and then you have the 4th hazard that is in with the Phoenix fight that shields her from all incoming damage. So by running this gauntlet twice, assuming that you are focusing on taking out those danger room hazards when they appear, you will be able to meet the criteria of destroying those 5 danger room hazards or more than 5 danger room hazards to meet the clear condition requirement. The other requirements that we need to touch on is you will need to defeat 10 bosses, which is accomplished by 2 complete runs of the gauntlet, because we have our fights against Iceman, that's 1, Gambit is 2, Cyclops and Cable is numbers 3 and 4, and then Phoenix is that 5th one, and then running the gauntlet a second time around will grant you access to all those fights again, which then meets the cap of defeating the 10 bosses required. So we've just about got Iceman taken down here in this fight. We'll run off one final ability from Thanos Infinite, and that will take him out and allow us to progress into the next section. And you'll notice that I run this one a lot differently than we did the first one. Of course, I am initially targeting a lot of these aim soldiers because the snipers in particular are not fun to have to deal with, as they take significant chunks of your health off of whichever team member happens to be affected by it. So taking them down is by far an optimal strategy. Another thing that's kind of interesting to note is that this version of Gambit behaves a little bit differently than the Gambit that you control. As you see, he has one of his Dangerous Ground abilities set up there, but it's significantly smaller than Gambit's Dangerous Ground that we have. And that might be because we have our Dangerous Ground attribute fully upgraded. I'm not quite certain. I'll have to double back around that and look again to see how that performs. But we are specifically waiting to take down too much of Gambit's health until we have an opportunity to take on these danger room hazards with the gravity orbs there. And that takes it down. Another difference in this version of Gambit is you saw that when he uses his What a Deal ability, where he throws charged cards out into the ground, he does so in a V formation, where when we use that attack, it goes out in just 3 cards scattered out in front of Gambit as a character. So it's interesting to note some of those variations to the attacks being doled out by your team members versus those same characters when they are put in as a mini-boss. Now, the last thing that we need to focus on in terms of clear condition rewards is the 4th and final category, which is easy enough. It's earning a score of 200,000 or more, and you should easily be able to attain that within your 2 loops of this gauntlet that you're going to need to do in order to gain the rewards from the previous segments and the previous clear conditions that are outlined here. So we're going to ride out the remainder of this fight. I will showcase a couple of strategies that I've seen that tend to hold up pretty well in terms of taking out the remainder of your opponents here. And as you see, you do want to roll around or run away from the piston that plunges down. The biggest pieces of advice that I have is actually for the final Phoenix fight, but we'll finalize this fight against Cyclops here in order to make our way over that way and kind of showcase some tips and tricks for that interaction there. The difficulty with this fight is mainly caused by what I mentioned earlier, where Cyclops has a lot of abilities that allow him ranged combat, and he also has a specific ability that allows him to shoot his repulsor rays and have them ricochet off the walls around him. But now that he's down and out, we can move right along, as that's the last time that we'll need to confront him in this context in order to gain the full clear rewards there. So the fourth and final leg of this gauntlet is where I have my most optimization recommendations here. You do want to get as many hits in on Phoenix early enough as you can to make sure that you can take her down. But as soon as that orb makes its appearance here, you'll want to take out that Danger Room hazard. And that will allow us to completely annihilate what's remaining of Phoenix's health as we unleash our extreme attacks on her. And you don't have a lot of opportunities to use extreme attacks, but using them all in this final context will very much assist with getting through that portion of the fight a lot easier than it otherwise could be. But that's all the advice that I have for the level 40 Fire and Fury Gauntlet run. So if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a video, as I have content coming to you on a daily basis. Thanks again for watching, and you have a great rest of your day.